This happened about a week ago. My regular andrologist was out on vacation, so they referred me to another doctor for my checkup. I remember feeling a bit annoyed at first. Getting comfortable with a new doctor can be a hassle, especially when you're already used to someone who knows your history. But man, if only I'd known what was about to happen. It's funny how these things work. Sometimes a routine change like this throws you for a loop in the best way possible. So I walked into the new doctor's office and I was frozen. Honestly, I'd thought about canceling the appointment, putting it off until my regular guy got back. But here I was, standing in the doorway, staring like an idiot because, right in front of me, was this ridiculously good-looking guy, maybe 35 years old, wearing a lab coat and looking way too attractive for someone working in healthcare. The whole scene just felt surreal. This guy wasn't just attractive. He was the kind of handsome that had me feeling out of my depth. I'm talking strong features, a jawline that could probably cut glass, a bit of stubble, and that look in his eyes that was half focus, half mystery. He hadn't noticed me yet since he was reading something on his monitor, his brow furrowed like he was deep in thought. I was already thinking I had to get it together because I was there for a checkup, not to get distracted. But it was like my brain wasn't catching up. All I could think about was the fact that his lab coat's top button was undone, showing just the slightest bit of his collarbone. It was like he'd walked straight out of some kind of story, and suddenly, I was a part of it. And the whole room had this kind of vibe I wasn't expecting. Usually, doctors' offices are all disinfectant and fluorescent lights, but his office was different. There was this faint smell of cologne or aftershave, something understated but clean, maybe with a hint of citrus. The lighting was softer too, with a warm, almost cozy feel to it. It felt welcoming, which is rare in a medical setting. I found myself trying to look around and take in the rest of the room just so I wouldn't keep staring at him, but everything brought my focus right back. After a few seconds, he looked up from his monitor and saw me standing there, clearly not prepared for whatever I was trying to keep under wraps. He smiled, a small, polite smile. But I could see that he was sizing me up in that professional way doctors do. There was nothing out of the ordinary in the way he said, "Come in," but I could already feel my nerves start to spike. I reminded myself I was just here for a routine visit, but it wasn't working. This felt anything but routine. As I walked in and sat down, he introduced himself and started asking the usual questions about my health and medical history. I kept trying to focus on answering him normally, but it was like every little detail was standing out to me. The way he listened, focused, attentive, occasionally nodding as he typed my answers into the computer. He looked up every so often, his eyes meeting mine just long enough for me to realize that I was still staring at him, like some kind of magnet was keeping me locked in. I hoped he didn't notice. But then when he looked away, I could catch my breath and think a little clearer. I tried to ground myself by looking around his office. There was a bookshelf behind him, lined with medical books and a few binders, and a framed certificate hanging on the wall, probably his degree. I tried to focus on that, tried to remind myself that I was here for a professional appointment with a doctor who probably saw 100 patients a week. This was all in my head. I was just overthinking things. But that thought didn't last long. He wrapped up his questions and said, "All right, let's get started with the exam." Those words hit differently, knowing I'd have to follow his lead and get through the exam without letting any of this show. We walked over to the examination area in the same office, and I could feel my heart rate kick up a notch. I kept telling myself that this was like any other appointment. I've been in and out of checkups like this for years. Usually, I could practically go on autopilot, and it was routine. But here, everything felt heightened, like I was hyper-aware of every little thing. The way his fingers adjusted his gloves with a practiced ease, how he rolled up his sleeves a little more, and his deep, calm voice as he guided me through the steps. He started with the basics, checking my throat and neck. His gloved hands gently cupped my neck as he felt for my lymph nodes, and I could feel the warmth of his touch through the gloves, his fingers firm but gentle. The whole moment had this weight to it, as though time had slowed down, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that kind of tension during an appointment. I did my best to keep things cool, not let any of this surface. But I was already at this point where my mind was racing, trying to keep everything straight, and there he was, completely composed, all business. It felt like he was completely oblivious to my reaction, Or maybe he just had the kind of self-control that let him keep his focus no matter what. Either way, he was so collected that it only made me more aware of my own reaction. The exam was about to get more intense, and I knew I had to hold it together. He guided me to the examination table with a calm professionalism that probably should have helped me relax, but somehow it only made my pulse race harder. I reminded myself again that I'd done this routine before, but there was something almost electric about the way he moved. Everything he did seemed so precise, from how he rolled his sleeves to the way he adjusted his gloves, his movements deliberate and steady, as though he had total control over the situation, and by extension me. Once I was up on the table, he started with a few basic checks. He examined my throat first, and his hands were confident but careful. His fingers pressed gently but firmly as he checked my lymph nodes, feeling along the sides of my neck with a pressure that was just enough to be thorough but still gentle. I could feel the latex of his gloves brushing against my skin, and it seemed like everything about him was amplified in that moment. The warmth of his hands, the supple scent of his cologne, mixed with the antiseptic of the room, and his steady breathing, perfectly calm and measured. I was trying not to overthink things, but my mind had other plans. Every detail was sticking with me, and I could feel myself getting tense, my heart thudding a little too loud in my chest. He moved from my throat to my shoulders, checking along my collarbone and working his way down, his hands steady and sure. His focus was so complete, and I could tell that he was taking his time, maybe because he sensed my nerves. The silence in the room was thick, and I couldn't help but notice how close he was, the supple sound of his breathing blending with mine. I kept my eyes on a spot on the wall to try and keep calm, but every so often I'd glance over at him just for a split second. Then he told me it was time for the more thorough part of the exam. He instructed me to take off my shirt, his tone professional, just as if he were guiding me through any other part of the process. I nodded and did as he asked, trying to keep my focus on the routine of it all. He turned around to adjust a few instruments, giving me a second to pull myself together. But even though he wasn't looking, I could still feel this sort of intensity hanging in the air, something that wasn't there before. It was as if he could sense that I was nervous, even though he didn't say a word. When he turned back around, he asked me to relax as much as possible, reassuring me with a calm, steady tone. He started with some gentle palpations around my abdomen, his hands pressing in a way that was firm but not uncomfortable. His gaze was focused, but every so often, he'd glance up at me to check if I was okay, those dark, intense eyes meeting mine in a way that made it impossible to look away. His attention was absolute, and there was something about that level of focus that was both reassuring and a little overwhelming. It felt surreal, honestly. Here I was, in a routine medical exam, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different happening, something beyond the usual clinical process. His hands moved with such precision, tracing along my sides and checking for any tenderness, and every touch seemed to linger just a fraction longer than it needed to. I knew I was reading into things, probably letting my imagination get carried away, but the more he worked, the more I felt like maybe I wasn't entirely alone in this feeling. At one point, he asked me to take a deep breath, his voice calm and even, and as I exhaled, I could feel his hand resting just below my chest, steadying me. It was a small gesture, something he probably did 100 times a day, but in that moment, it felt incredibly personal. His touch was confident, like he knew exactly how to put me at ease, and for a second, I forgot about everything else, the nerves, the awkwardness, even the fact that this was just a standard checkup. Then came the moment I'd been dreading, the part of the exam that no guy particularly looks forward to. He could probably tell that I was tense, but he didn't rush me. He gave me a quick nod, his expression reassuring, as if to let me know that everything was fine, that this was just another part of the process. He put on a fresh glove, the snap of latex breaking the silence, and positioned himself behind me. My heart was pounding, but I did my best to stay calm, taking a few slow, deep breaths. When his hand made contact, it was like every nerve in my body lit up at once. He moved carefully, his grip firm but not too tight, and I could feel myself tensing up, trying to keep my reactions in check. He was totally professional, maintaining a steady rhythm, and I could tell that he was focused on being as thorough as possible. But there was something about his touch that felt different, something I couldn't quite put into words. It was like he was balancing that line between professionalism and something else, something unspoken. As he continued, I could feel myself getting more and more aware of every little movement, every shift in pressure. His hand was strong, steady, and I could feel this quiet intensity in the way he worked, like he was completely absorbed in what he was doing. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this moment than just a routine exam. When he finally finished, there was this brief, lingering pause, as though neither of us wanted to break the silence. He looked up, his gaze meeting mine, and for a split second, it felt like time stopped. There was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place, and I felt this surge of connection, like we were sharing something beyond words. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt perfectly in sync, where you realize that maybe, just maybe, the other person is feeling the same way. After a moment, he cleared his throat and stepped back, removing his gloves with a practiced ease. He handed me a piece of paper with his notes and recommendations, his expression calm, but with this barely there smile that felt almost like a secret. As I took the paper, our fingers brushed for a second, just a quick, fleeting touch, but it was enough to send a jolt through me. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, he said, his tone professional but with a softness that felt like it was meant just for me. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady as I thanked him and gathered my things. But as I turned to leave, he handed me a card with his personal contact information, and I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lingered on mine for just a little longer than necessary. The moment had arrived, one that's definitely memorable for any guy. I was almost bracing myself, trying to keep it together as he prepped for this part of the exam. He was still calm and professional, but something about the way he slipped on a fresh glove felt charged, maybe because we both knew this was an intense part of the process. He nodded at me, an almost imperceptible gesture to reassure me, and then placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Just relax, he said, his voice low and steady, and I could feel every nerve firing in response. As he started, I tried to focus on anything else, counting ceiling tiles, focusing on my breathing, but the room seemed to narrow, with every detail honing in on him. He moved with such deliberate care, his hands steady and confident as he worked, and it was almost like he dialed into this new level of attention, his every move careful, precise, almost calculated. It felt like he was entirely focused, making sure I was as comfortable as possible, even though we both knew this was anything but ordinary. I couldn't help but react, a quiet, unplanned sound escaping me when he began. I immediately felt a wave of embarrassment, but when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him give me a quick, reassuring look. His expression was calm, but there was a flicker of something else, like he was trying to keep himself just as composed. My own reactions were betraying me, and I could feel myself tensing, aware of every single movement, every shift in pressure as he continued. I clenched my hands, trying to keep control, but I could feel the tension building. Just then, he looked up, his eyes locking onto mine. It was brief, a split second, but in that instant, there was an undeniable spark, something unspoken yet so clear between us. I knew he saw it too. He paused, his hand steady as he held my gaze, and I could see this flicker of acknowledgement. There was this pause where it felt like neither of us dared to breathe, like we were both caught in this unexpected, intense connection that we couldn't ignore. He didn't look away immediately, and for that moment, it felt like the whole room had shrunk down to just the two of us. After a beat, he cleared his throat, and his expression shifted back to neutral, but I knew he felt it too. He returned to the examination, his hands moving with the same steady, professional care, but I could feel this tension simmering beneath the surface. It was like we were both aware of the connection, even though neither of us was willing to acknowledge it out loud. And when he finally told me to turn around, the way he looked at me was anything but casual. When I did turn, I could tell that he was as caught off guard as I was. There was this split second where his gaze shifted, and I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely exhilarated. His eyes met mine, and he didn't look away. I could feel my pulse pounding, and I could see the way he was processing, like he was trying to find his footing. There was this quiet intensity between us, a mutual understanding that felt like it went beyond words. After a long pause, he finally cleared his throat, regaining his professional composure as he continued with the rest of the exam. But his focus was still sharp, almost too intense, as though he was just as affected as I was. He went through the motions, but I could tell that he was hyper-aware of every detail, every small reaction. And I was too. When he finished, he took a small step back, giving us both a moment to gather ourselves. He didn't say anything at first, but I could feel the weight of his gaze, as though he was silently debating his next move. After a beat, he finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I think we're done here," he said, but there was an edge to his tone, something that made the words feel loaded with unspoken meaning. As I gathered my things, he handed me his business card, his fingers brushing against mine for just a second longer than necessary. I felt this jolt, a spark that felt electric, and when I looked up, he was watching me with that same intense, unreadable expression. There was a pause, a moment where it felt like we were both considering what to say, what to do. I wanted to ask him if he felt it too, if he was as caught up in this as I was, but before I could find the words, he spoke. "If you have any questions, feel free to reach out," he said, his voice calm but his gaze lingering, like he was trying to convey something beyond the words. And as he handed me the card, I saw that he'd written his personal number on the back, a quiet, supple gesture that felt like an invitation. I knew I was pushing my limits just by being there, but something about the way he moved, so focused and composed, made it almost impossible to hold back. As he continued with the palpation, every touch felt amplified, the steady pressure of his hands feeling both clinical and something more at the same time. My heart was racing, my mind a blur, and without even realizing it, I reached out, my hands wrapping around his arms almost instinctively. I could feel the strength in his shoulders, the solid frame beneath the crisp fabric of his coat. I thought he'd pull away or maybe tell me to keep my hands to myself, but he didn't move. For a moment, the room felt suspended, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead fading into the background as he froze under my touch. His breathing hitched, just slightly, and I could feel the warmth of his skin even through the fabric. I almost let go, realizing how forward I'd been, but before I could even think about pulling back, he leaned down slightly, his mouth close enough to my ear that I could feel the whisper of his breath. "Not here," he murmured, his voice so low I almost didn't catch it. It was steady, calm, but there was an edge to it that made me shiver. "I liked you too," he continued, his words barely a breath against my skin, "but not here." Those last words hit me with a mix of relief and anticipation, each word feeling like a promise wrapped in restraint. I loosened my grip, letting my hands fall back to my sides, but I could still feel the warmth of his presence, the weight of those unspoken words hanging between us. We met up that evening, both of us probably a little more on edge than we wanted to admit. He texted me the address to a small wine bar tucked into a quiet part of the city. I arrived a bit early, mostly out of nerves, and I couldn't help but glance around every few minutes, wondering if he'd actually show. When he finally walked in, it was like the whole room shifted focus. He had traded his clinical white coat for a dark button-down that fit him perfectly, sleeves rolled up just enough to show off his forearms. I couldn't help but smile when he saw me, and he returned it with a soft, almost shy look I hadn't seen in him before. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, catching up on small talk and getting to know each other outside the sterile walls of the clinic. He ordered a deep, rich red wine for both of us, and we spent the next hour just talking. I'd always pictured him as the stoic, quiet type, but he surprised me with a quick wit and easy charm that felt disarming. He told me about his passion for medicine, the long hours, and how he managed to balance the intensity of his job with a life outside the hospital. I found myself drawn to the way he described things, his voice smooth and calm, and I could feel my nerves fading as we shared stories, slipping into an easy rhythm that felt almost natural. After a while, he reached across the table, brushing his fingers against mine. It was such a simple touch, but I felt that same electric jolt as when I'd first seen him in his office. His eyes met mine, and there was this unspoken understanding, this tension that had been building since the clinic. I could see the flicker of something more in his gaze, something that hinted he was feeling this just as intensely as I was. I didn't say a word, neither did he, but we both knew it was time to take this somewhere more private. We ended up at his place, a sleek, modern apartment that was as polished and put together as he was. The place was filled with understated touches. A few framed prints on the walls, shelves lined with books, and a few travel souvenirs that hinted at a side of him I hadn't seen yet. He led me into the living room, and I could feel my heart pounding as we settled onto the couch, the quiet intimacy of his space making everything feel that much more real. He poured us each another glass of wine, and as we sipped in comfortable silence, he leaned in close, his gaze focused entirely on me. I felt this soft warmth in the way he looked at me, something patient and understanding that made my nerves settle. He reached over, gently brushing a stray piece of hair from my face, and I couldn't help but smile at the tenderness in his touch. It was like he'd waited just as long as I had for this moment, and now that we were here, he wasn't rushing a thing. When he leaned in to kiss me, it was slow, deliberate. His hand cradled the back of my head, pulling me close as his lips met mine with a softness that made my breath catch. I could feel his steady pulse as he pressed closer, his touch gentle but firm, as though he was savoring every second. We stayed like that for a while, just getting lost in the feel of each other, the weight of his hand on my back and the warmth of his body against mine creating this quiet intensity that felt both familiar and completely new. He pulled back for a moment, his hand still resting on my shoulder, and looked at me with that same serious expression I'd seen back in his office. But now, there was a softness to it, a vulnerability that made him seem even more real. I could tell he was searching for something in my expression, making sure I was comfortable, that this was what we both wanted. And in that instant, I knew there was nowhere else I wanted to be. We moved from the couch to the bedroom, and I felt my heart race as we crossed the threshold, the reality of the moment settling over us like a warm blanket. He guided me to the edge of the bed, his hands gentle but sure as he helped me out of my shirt, his fingers brushing against my skin in a way that made every nerve come alive. There was something almost reverent in the way he moved, like he was discovering a part of himself as much as he was discovering me. As he moved closer, his shirt slipping from his shoulders, I couldn't help but take in every detail of him, the way his muscles tensed and relaxed with each movement, the quiet confidence in his gaze. His hands found their way to mine, pulling me close as we sank into each other, the quiet warmth of the room enveloping us as we let ourselves get lost in the moment. It was slow, unhurried, a dance that felt both familiar and brand new, with every touch and every glance adding to the quiet connection we shared. We spent the next few hours just being together, talking in between, sharing quiet laughs and soft smiles that felt like little secrets. At one point, I told him I'd never met someone quite like him, and he laughed, this soft, genuine sound that made me feel like I'd known him forever. And when he held me close, his arms wrapped around me as we drifted off into a comfortable silence, I knew that whatever had started in that clinic was only the beginning. After that first night together, it felt like everything shifted. We both knew it was more than just a fleeting connection, there was something deeper forming between us. Each text exchanged after our initial meeting felt charged with anticipation, and I found myself looking forward to every message, every plan we made. We fell into a rhythm of secret meetups, stolen moments, and quiet dinners where our laughter echoed softly against the walls of his apartment, creating a cozy atmosphere that felt all our own. The second time we met, it was at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It was one of those charming places where the ambience was warm, the lights dim, and the smell of garlic and fresh herbs filled the air. As I arrived, I could see him sitting at a table in the corner, his dark hair slightly tousled, and a smile lighting up his face as soon as he spotted me. There was something about the way he looked at me, his gaze filled with warmth, that made my heart skip a beat. We shared a bottle of wine over a plate of homemade pasta, the conversation flowing effortlessly between us as we explored each other's lives more deeply. He spoke passionately about his work, sharing stories of difficult cases and moments of triumph that reminded me just how dedicated he was. I found myself hanging on his every word, captivated by his passion and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about what he loved. As the evening wore on, we found ourselves leaning closer across the table, our knees brushing together. I could feel this magnetic pull drawing us in, the chemistry palpable. He reached out, his fingers gently wrapping around mine, and in that moment, everything outside of us faded away. I could feel the warmth of his skin against mine, the way our hands fit together like they were made for each other, and it sent a thrill through me. When we finally left the restaurant, the streets were bustling with energy, and the crisp night air felt electric. We strolled side by side, our shoulders brushing as we talked and laughed, the tension between us building with every step. As we walked, he casually slipped his arm around my shoulder, pulling me in close, and I felt my heart race. The warmth of his body against mine felt perfect, and it was hard to believe how natural it all felt. We ended up back at his apartment, both of us aware that the night was far from over. As soon as we stepped inside, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine for a moment before he leaned in, capturing my lips with his. This kiss was different, more urgent, as though we were both acknowledging the feelings that had been building since our first meeting. His hands tangled in my hair, and I could feel the intensity of his desire in every touch, every movement. We found our way to the bedroom again, and this time, it felt like we were both ready to explore even deeper. I could feel the tension in the air, an unspoken promise hanging between us as we lost ourselves in each other. The dim light cast soft shadows across the room, and everything felt intimate and safe. As he kissed me, I pulled him closer, our bodies fitting perfectly together. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the way his muscles tensed under my touch as I explored his back, my fingers tracing the lines of his form. There was a delicious thrill in discovering every inch of him, and I could tell he was just as eager to return the favor. He took his time, exploring my body with a gentleness that sent shivers down my spine. Each kiss was careful, deliberate, as though he was memorizing every detail. He trailed soft kisses down my neck, his lips grazing against my skin, and I couldn't help but moan softly at the sensation. My heart raced as I lost myself in the moment, the world outside fading away until there was nothing but the two of us, tangled in each other's arms. Eventually he pulled back, his eyes searching mine again, and I could see a mix of desire and something deeper reflected in his gaze. "Are you sure you want this?" he asked softly, his voice low and filled with sincerity. I nodded, breathless, my heart pounding as I pulled him closer again. "More than anything," I whispered, and that seemed to be all the reassurance he needed. We melted into each other again, the heat between us rising as we continued to explore. Our movements became more urgent, the kisses more intense as we lost ourselves in the moment. I could feel the warmth of his body pressed against mine, the way he moved with confidence and grace, and it only fueled my desire. As the night wore on, it became a blend of passion and tenderness, a perfect balance of exploration and intimacy. We spent hours wrapped up in each other, our breaths mingling in the dim light as we discovered what made each other tick. Each soft whisper, each gentle caress deepened the connection we shared, and it felt like we were both revealing parts of ourselves that we hadn't shown anyone else. After that night, we found ourselves meeting more frequently, each encounter bringing us closer together. It was in those quiet moments, lying together in bed after a long day, that we truly began to connect. We shared secrets, dreams, and even fears, opening up in a way that felt incredibly intimate. He would often run his fingers through my hair as we talked, a gentle, calming gesture that made me feel safe and cherished. One particular evening stands out in my memory. He had invited me over for dinner, and as I entered his apartment, the smell of something delicious wafted through the air. He had put together a simple yet elegant meal, and as we sat together, enjoying the food and the conversation, there was a palpable warmth between us. After dinner, we ended up curled up on the couch, his arm draped around my shoulders as we watched a movie. I could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my side, and it was comforting. At one point, he paused the film and turned to me, his expression serious yet soft. "I'm really glad you're in my life," he said, his voice sincere, and I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. I smiled back at him, my heart swelling at the acknowledgement of what we had. "Me too," I replied, and as our eyes locked, the air felt thick with unspoken emotions. I leaned in, capturing his lips with mine in a soft kiss that quickly deepened. This time, it was a gentle exploration, a blend of soft kisses and tender touches as we slowly navigated the space between us. I could feel the heat building again, but there was a sense of intimacy that made it feel different. It was as if we were saying so much without words, expressing everything we felt in that moment. Eventually, we found ourselves back in his bedroom, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. I could feel the tension building as we moved together, our bodies fitting perfectly as we sank into the bed. It was a dance of discovery, exploring each other's bodies with a sense of reverence that made every touch feel electric. As we settled into our intimacy, I could feel a connection deepening. The way he looked at me, the way his hands moved, it all felt like we were sharing something sacred, something beyond just physical pleasure. Every kiss, Every caress was laced with emotion, and I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't experienced before. Afterward, we lay entwined, our bodies still humming with the aftermath of our connection. He pulled me close, his fingers tracing gentle patterns along my back, and we talked softly about our day, our lives, and our hopes for the future. In those quiet moments, I realized just how much he meant to me, how much I valued this connection we were building together. As time went on, we continued to explore this intimacy, each encounter bringing us closer and allowing us to grow both individually and together. It felt like we were crafting a beautiful story, one filled with warmth, laughter, and an ever-deepening bond that made my heart soar. After weeks of secret meetings and stolen moments, my relationship with the doctor blossomed into something I cherished deeply. Each time I left his apartment, I felt lighter, my heart buoyed by the warmth of shared laughter and tender touches. The outside world faded away, leaving only our little sanctuary filled with connection. One evening, after a particularly long week, he invited me over for dinner. The aroma of something savory filled the air, wrapping around me like a warm hug. Candles flickered on the table, casting a soft glow that made the place feel intimate and inviting. His smile, ever warm and captivating, welcomed me, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Dinner unfolded with laughter and tasing, and as we reminisced about previous encounters and shared dreams, the atmosphere thickened with warmth. After the meal, we migrated to the couch, where the energy shifted to something electric. As we settled in, our knees touched, narrowing the distance until warmth radiated from our bodies. His soft touch sent shivers down my spine, igniting the air with a thrill of anticipation. Leaning closer, his fingers grazed along my thigh, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a magnetic pull that drew us together. As the tension built, our lips met, igniting a spark that felt as if the very air around us shimmered. The kiss deepened, filled with urgency and desire, the kind that only came from a connection built over time. His hands roamed, exploring every curve and contour, taking their time to savor the moment. In that intimate cocoon, I felt vulnerable yet powerful as he explored me like a masterful artist painting a masterpiece. The warmth of his body against mine intensified the connection, every kiss igniting a sense of passion and longing that was both exhilarating and comforting. With each touch, he demonstrated his admiration, his hands gliding over my skin, igniting every nerve ending. I reveled in the pleasure, surrendering to the sensations, feeling the intoxicating rush of affection enveloping us both. As the evening progressed, we found our way to the bedroom, the atmosphere shifting once again into a space of anticipation and intimacy. The dim light cast soft shadows across the room, making the moment feel sacred. We understood, without needing to speak, that tonight would be special. Hovering over me, his weight offered a sense of comfort and safety. The air grew heavy with expectation, and as we kissed again, it felt as if the world outside had ceased to exist. The kiss was filled with urgency and deepening desire, the kind that had been building since our first encounter. His hands moved to the hem of my shirt, slowly lifting it, exposing my skin. There was a brief moment of stillness as he took in the sight, admiration filling his eyes. Each touch ignited a rush of confidence, and I felt my heart swell with pride. His fingers traveled over my torso, exploring with a feather-light touch that sent shivers down my spine. Every caress was a conversation of its own, expressing the intensity of our connection without the need for words. The warmth of his breath against my skin added to the electric atmosphere, creating a sensation that was intoxicating. When his hands finally found the waistband of my pants, he moved with purpose, slowly unbuttoning them. The gentle brush of his fingers against my skin sent waves of pleasure coursing through me. There was a thrilling rush at being exposed, and the intensity of his gaze ignited something deep within. As he took me into his mouth, a gasp escaped my lips, the sensation overwhelming. He moved slowly at first, savoring every inch, exploring with curiosity and genuine enjoyment. The way he cherished every moment made me feel cherished in return, the pleasure intensifying with each passing second. His enthusiasm was intoxicating. I lost myself in the act, exploring with fervor, and he urged me closer as he savored the moment. The pleasure built in waves, overwhelming in its intensity, and I surrendered to the sensations, allowing myself to be consumed by the experience. After what felt like an eternity of bliss, he pulled away, a satisfied expression gracing his features. The warmth of our connection lingered in the air, filled with admiration and desire. I felt a surge of confidence, eager to reciprocate the pleasure. As we shifted positions, I focused on showing him just how much I appreciated everything that had transpired between us. The intimacy deepened as we explored each other's bodies, losing ourselves in the rhythm of our movements. Each kiss and each caress became a shared expression of our longing and connection. The world outside faded completely as we focused solely on each other, the chemistry between us palpable. The evening stretched on, filled with moments of pure intimacy, where every touch spoke of our growing bond. As we embraced, it felt as though we were two halves of a whole, exploring the depths of our connection in a way that felt sacred and beautiful. Days turned into weeks, and with every encounter, our bond strengthened. We continued to explore each other physically and emotionally, the intimacy growing richer with each passing moment. I reveled in his admiration, and the way he relished every inch of my body only deepened our connection. In the days that followed, I eagerly anticipated our next meeting. Each encounter was filled with exploration and discovery, a testament to our growing bond. His appreciation for my physique never waned, and he continued to express his admiration in ways that made me feel confident and desired. In the intimate cocoon we had created together, I felt free to explore my own desires, revealing more of myself with each meeting. The chemistry between us intensified, creating an atmosphere that was both thrilling and comforting. As we continued to share these moments, it became clear that our connection was blossoming into something deeper, rooted in trust, admiration, and an undeniable spark of attraction. The journey we were on together was filled with discovery and intimacy, the memories of each encounter etched in my mind. The joy of being together, the thrill of shared secrets, and the warmth of our growing bond transformed our connection into something truly special, leaving an indelible mark on both our hearts. The news came unexpectedly, like a thunderbolt in a clear sky. My partner, the man who had brought so much joy and passion into my life, had been offered a job on the other side of the country. I remember sitting on the couch when he walked in, the excitement radiating from him. As he shared the details, my heart sank. This was a fantastic opportunity for him, one that he had worked hard to achieve, but it also meant the end of our time together. In the days that followed, we both tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the looming reality of his departure hung over us like a dark cloud. We filled our time with laughter and late-night talks, reminiscing about the moments that had defined our relationship, the first time we kissed, the weekends spent in each other's arms, and the passion that had ignited between us from the very beginning. As the day of his departure approached, I felt a sense of urgency, a need to fully embrace every last moment we had together. The night before he was set to leave, we decided to create our own farewell, one that would be etched in my memory forever. We started with dinner, cooking together in the small kitchen we had shared countless meals in. The air was filled with the familiar scents of our favorite dishes, but tonight everything felt different. Every laugh, every glance, held a weight that I hadn't noticed before. After we finished eating, we moved to the living room, where we coupled on the couch, the flickering light of the TV casting a warm glow around us. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension building between us, a blend of desire and melancholy. The knowledge that this was our last night together hung heavily in the air, and with each passing minute, I became acutely aware of how much I would miss him. When he leaned in to kiss me, it felt electric, a surge of emotion that left me breathless. His lips brushed against mine, soft at first, but quickly deepening into something more fervent. I melted against him, losing myself in the sensation, in the heat of our bodies pressed together. The kiss spoke volumes of love, of longing, and of the sorrow that lay ahead. We moved to the bedroom, the space that had witnessed our most intimate moments. In the soft glow of the bedside lamp, I took in his figure, the way the light danced across his skin, highlighting every curve and contour. My heart raced at the thought that this would be the last time we would share this sacred space together. As we undressed, I felt a mix of emotions, excitement, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I wanted to memorize every inch of him, every sigh and moan, the way his body responded to my touch. We took our time, savoring each caress, each kiss, as if trying to imprint this moment in our memories forever. When we finally came together, it was as if the world outside ceased to exist. Our bodies moved in perfect harmony, a dance of passion and intimacy that felt transcendent. The connection we shared was palpable, and I could feel the love radiating between us, intertwining our souls in a way that made everything else fade away. I felt alive, every touch, every kiss igniting a fire within me. I was lost in him, consumed by the experience, knowing that this was the best sex I had ever had, not just because of the physical pleasure, but because of the emotional connection that tied us together. With every thrust, every gasp, I felt the weight of our impending separation, amplifying the intensity of our union. But as the night progressed, reality crept back in. The knowledge that this was our last night together loomed over us like a heavy fog. In the heat of passion, we both fought to ignore it, but eventually, the emotional weight became too much to bear. After a moment of silence, we pulled back slightly, gazing into each other's eyes. As we lay intertwined in bed afterward, the world felt both right and painfully wrong. I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine, but beneath that warmth lay a shroud of impending loss. It was an odd contradiction, the joy of being together, juxtaposed with the heartache of what was to come. Eventually, we found the courage to talk about it, our words heavy with emotion. We both understood that a long-distance relationship would be a struggle, a torment that would only make it harder for us. As much as it pained me, I knew it was the right decision. We could either drag out the inevitable, or we could cherish the memories we had made and part on good terms. We shared tears that night, the kind that felt cathartic yet heartbreaking. It was hard to let go, to say goodbye to the best partner I had ever had. But we also knew that our paths were diverging, and it was time to honor that reality. In the quiet moments before dawn, as the first light broke through the curtains, we held each other tightly, knowing that this would be our last embrace. I took in the scent of him, the feel of his skin against mine, the way his heart beat in rhythm with my own. It was a moment suspended in time, a bittersweet farewell that encapsulated the love we had shared. When it was finally time for him to leave, we stood at the door, both reluctant to say goodbye. With one last kiss, I felt the weight of everything we had built together, every moment of laughter, every shared dream flooding my heart. As he walked away, I felt an emptiness settle in. I watched him go, a mix of sorrow and gratitude filling me. He had been my best partner, and our connection had brought me the most profound joy. The memories we had created together would forever be etched in my heart, a reminder of the love we had shared, even if we were no longer together. In that moment, I realized that while the distance would separate us physically, the love we had built would always remain a cherished part of me.